Hi, everybody. We're just going to give a couple of minutes that people who are still rolling in get into the webinar. Um, Hi, everyone. I'm Kaja. If you don't know, most of you probably have met me or done some training with me. The objective of today's short and sweet webinar is that we are going to go through the tenant check process. So it's going to go a bit deeper than we normally would, talk through a few points, give you some um, insight into the, tips and tricks and hints for using our tenant check and how it works behind the scene. Um, it's often discussed if you do if you ever do training with me on the basic product. It's also discussed when we go through the refresher, but obviously it's discussed in learning a whole lot of information at the same time. So I like to just do these, in-depth looks at certain parts so that we can clearly understand, and if we've got any questions, we have an opportunity to ask them. So I'm going to kick off. You all will get sent a copy of this webinar after the webinar in the next few days, so that you can refer back to it or share it with your co-workers if you need to. Okay, so the part that we're obviously looking at is the tenant check. Now, in order for us to be able to run tenant checks, we need to be in the second part of the process, so stage 2. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to go into this guy here, and we would have looked over his stage 1, and for whatever decision we've made him a preferred candidate, which then triggers that tenant check part of it to happen. What am I talking about? I'm just going to mark these guys as preferred as well, because I need them a little bit in a little second to show you something. Now, what I'm talking about is that as soon as we move into stage 2, that's when that more private information becomes available, including the tenant check section. Okay, so up here we've got Peter and Mede. They are actually, their stage 2 information's pending, which means that they haven't yet supplied it. That in the future, we've requested for them to give us that information. But what we're really looking at in their one then is that up here is where we will be able to run tenant checks. Okay, so we can click into here and it's going to take us to another screen. Now, the reason I like to use this guy Peter as an example is because although we're still in stage 1, if we were in stage 2, this would all be, no longer grayed out, and this is how we would go about running those checks, is just clicking a button. Okay, now, and the background check information would appear. Now, the reason I show you that here is because if we go to my friend Duncan over here, who we do have access to that stage 2 information, due to this being a training account, I have actually already clicked those buttons, and I now have the option to view that tenant check. So I would have, instead of saying run tenant check, it's going to say view tenant check, because I have actually already run them. Now you can click this button here, but also some of you might not realize, but you can actually also click over here. So these are actually these two here, you can click between them here as well. So we can either use this button here, or you can just click here. What happens is, as soon as we go into stage 2, as part of the application form, actually, let's take it one step better. As part of the application form, what we do have is we ask for their consents to run these checks. Okay. Majority of people say yes, that's fine. You can run your checks, these checks that you need to run on me as part of your process, and that's when you'll be able to click the button to run an ID check, click the button to run a credit check. If for any reason that applicant hasn't consented and they've decided, no, I don't consent to you running that, it will show that they have not consented. That is their right to click, that they can give you a right. It might be that they want you to know who's running the check. So maybe you'd have to pick up the phone and give them a call and say, hey, Duncan, I noticed that you didn't consent for me to run a tenant check. Is there any reason why? They might say, oh, actually, I'm okay with it. Just, this reason. I just wanted you to to know who's running credit checks on me, etc., etc. So you would then say to them, okay, well, if you consent, what I need you to do is I need you to log back into your Renti account, and then you need to go to the consent page and adjust that consent. Okay, so that happens every so often that someone is like that, or they might say, hey, I don't want you to run a credit check. Then it's going to be up to you whether or not you want to go further with the application without running those checks. Okay, because the idea behind that information with tenant checks and all that is that we do have to get their consent in order to run them. Remember, I've been a property manager. I know it's part of our process, but it is also their right to say, no, I don't want to. And then it's up to you what you do further than that. Okay. Before I carry on, there's actually a little chat thing. So if you have any questions, throw your questions in. That'll tell me that there's some questions come about. And so I can answer them either right away while we're still on the subject, or we can go, I can cover them off at the end. Okay. So when a tenant check is run in Renti and they have consented, and in particular, we actually for background checks, they don't consent. That's just part of it because we get our background checks from open information. So as soon as the application is taken into stage 2, you will see a background check has been run and done. Okay, so you will see results appear. The reason for this is that we use the name that they have provided to run a name matching background check. Okay, now, if there is one thing that you learn from today, it's this. Before you are tempted to scroll down and look at that background check, because it's obviously a free part and it appears straight away, that information is below here, we can see it. Before you do that, please check, do the ID check first. Verify that identification. The reason I say this is because of the name. If they have spelt their name by accident wrong, or they have put their name in the wrong order, or there is a mistake in their name, the information that you see in that background check could be incorrect. So you might see that, oh, there's nothing on Google about them. Oh, there's nothing through the tenancy tribunal. So what I would always recommend is that first and foremost, you run the ID verification or the ID check first. If your tenant, your applicant provides a New Zealand driver's license, we are able to run that New Zealand driver's license through the New Zealand Transport Agency. We send it to them. We say, hey, can you verify that this is a current valid driver's license? Okay. Then it comes back to our system and it says, yes, it matched, or no, certain details didn't. Okay. And that is shown here. And to run that, all we do is push that button. You just push a button. It says, run ID verification. Okay. So this is where those results show. When I say we send it to them, I don't mean we put it in the mailbox and we send off a copy and then they email, then they send us back a letter. It's done in that virtual world, obviously, via, the powers, the things that happen, and we go boom, and the next second later are the results. And what we can see here is I have run that check and here is the results. Now, anywhere there's a tick, it means that yes, the name or the piece of information that Renti provided us, so with this name here, Duncan Roy, it matched the name that we've got recorded on the ID. Okay, so that is a match to how it's spelt. First name, last name, middle name, if it's there. Date of birth is the other thing that it matches that. But here, if you ever see the little caution red and it says we could not verify this document, something on it didn't verify. For example, here it's numbers, and up here are the numbers that they're talking about. So they're talking about the driver's license number and the version number. In a past life, you're not going to believe this, but I actually worked for New Zealand Transport Agency in their driver's license section. So I actually know a lot about the common mistakes that happen here. So the first one that we probably have here with numbers verified is potentially when they were entering their numbers, they put in the wrong letter or the wrong number. So what we need to do as property managers is when we see something doesn't verify, so hey, this didn't match, we go and see, okay, is it just a basic mistake, and where has it happened? So I would look at the name on the ID, I'd view the ID, and I'd look at it and go, oh no, Duncan spelt his name wrong. He put an O instead of an A, okay? Or maybe the number didn't match. He put a number 4 instead of a number 5. Those are little simple mistakes that might happen. We're dealing with humans. So you could just edit the ID details, and then rerun that check again. Boom, it comes back, yay, it's verified. Sometimes you might get that it doesn't verify. All the numbers are exactly the same. All the numbers are, everything about it looks like it's spelled exactly the same. The numbers are exactly the same. The date of birth is exactly the same. Now, going from the fact that I used to work for New Zealand Transport Agency, the biggest question we used to get is, somebody told me my driver's license isn't real. It's not that it's not real. There's something about it that's not going through the system correct. So generally, it's to do with this number here called version. Okay, so somebody loses their license, as in they misplace it. They get a new one. Guess what? It was under my bed. I found it. So now I've actually got two versions of the same driver's license. One version is not current. Okay. And the number, how they do the number sequence isn't 111, and then the next version you get is 112. No, it's just a randomized number. So you're looking, as a person, you're looking at both IDs. They look exactly the same, except the version number's wrong. You just go with that one that you had in your, the left one, not the right one. Potentially you're using a current, it's not a valid driver's license. It's no longer in the system. Okay, so that could be why the version number is wrong. It's not because it's fake. It's just not. So if you come across, if you've done everything I said and you've gone through, well, let's check the numbers are correct, etc., I would go potentially back to the applicant and say, hey, it seems to be something wrong. Maybe you should contact New Zealand Transport Agency just to make sure that your license is the current version. Okay, so just get them to go back and check with New Zealand Transport Agency. Honestly, they get calls about that all the time, and it's usually just because someone had two copies and they're using the wrong version at that point. That's a common mistake that happens there. The other one is that they lost their license, but this time I'm not talking about misplaced it. I'm talking about they were told they were no longer allowed to use that driver's license as a valid form of ID. It's no longer valid for driving a car. They've had it taken off them, but they didn't actually physically hand over the license. They still use it for their ID. If we put that through the system, it's going to say this is not a valid driver's license. So that's what it means. It doesn't mean it doesn't represent them as, hey, this is my picture and this is who I am. It just means it's not currently, shouldn't be used for driving a car, let's say. So once again, you can just ask them, at any time have you ever had to replace your driver's license for any reason? And they would probably go, actually, I got my driver's license taken off me because I had too many speeding fines, whatever it is, but I'm still using it for ID. So at least you would understand why it didn't get verified. Okay, how you go a step further with that is really up to you and your agency and whatever you're looking, planning to do with that. But those are common things that happen. So the name one, sometimes people get their name in the wrong order because they may go by a different name. Or my name's, my name is, I've got a long name, but I always use my little nickname. So my name's Kaja, but I actually just go by Kaz, and everybody's called me Kaz for years. Please don't call me Kaz. But you know what I mean? So I cut my name down to 3 letters. It's not actually my legal name, which is the question we asked there, but I put it on my driver's license. I put it on my application form. Once again, it's not going to verify if you're not using your legal name because that's what we're looking at. So there's 2 options for the name. Now, you could go back to the applicant, once again, say, hey, log back into your Renti account, update your name because you've actually made a spelling mistake or it's not in the right order and we just need you to change that. We do have the option down here, which is where we can edit the applicant's details. Okay, so we can throw in we can put in that. Now, I just want to validate that we are not changing their name. We are updating it. We're just correcting a spelling mistake. Okay, so we just, Duncan is what his name is, not Duncon. It's an A and an O. I'm just changing that. The middle name, sometimes the way the layout on the driver's license is not what they've been going by for their whole life. So, but we're looking for their legal name. We need it for the application form. We need it for running credit checks, and we want it for the background check as well. We do have that space on there when they go through the application process for preferred name. So, his preferred name is Dunky. And then below that, we've also got date of birth. When people fill in applications, I've found that every so often they think that they're born in the year they're filling in the application. So we get a few that come through that say 2024. Okay, so Once we've updated that, we rerun it and we've got the ID check coming through. Something else to understand is that we also offer applicants to upload overseas passports, and New Zealand and overseas, and also we have other, so that can be 18 plus, other IDs from overseas. It might be foreign driver's licenses and stuff, and they will put those in if they have nothing else. Okay, so you're often going to see one here that you cannot put through a system to verify. The New Zealand driver's license is the only one that can be done by all agencies, and a few have also got the New Zealand passport ability. But what you need to understand is that if you cannot verify it through another system, you need to do your self-verification. Is the name the same? So you'd look at the ID, you'd make sure it's spelt the same way. Does the date of birth match? Does it look like a valid form of identification? Like Google's your friend here. If you don't know what the latest 18 plus cards look like, that will help you to see what they look like in a picture form. Okay. After you've done that one, the next step that I would take if I was doing a tenant check is I would scroll past that credit check and I'd come back to that and I would go down to that background check. And the reason I do this is because background checks, as I mentioned before, are free. So they don't incur a cost. Credit checks do incur a cost. So I'd probably go ID first, then I'd come down to the background checks. And what I want you to understand is, as I mentioned before, background checks use name matching, how you do name matching at the end. I've had a question come through from Erica. I will do that edit ID and recheck that she's requested that you show how I actually run it. That I'll show you that at the end, okay? Otherwise, it'll stuff up my flow of how it appears. But I will do that at the end for anyone who wants to see me actually run an edit ID recheck, okay? Cool. What was I saying? So background check, name matching only. And what we throw it through out there is, this is obviously information that's available, and we've just collated it for you. So we go to the Tenancy Tribunal, the Judicial Decisions, and Parole Board. Okay. Now, that's run through these three different places, and we use that name matching, and then something comes back here. For this one, his name's Duncan Roy. In this article, Duncan Roy is mentioned. So what I need to do is I need to go and view that article, that judicial decision, and find out, is it about my Duncan Roy? Okay, or is it another person called Duncan Roy? Now I have his date of birth. I probably have a little bit more information. So I read through the document and there's the date of birth. It matches my Duncan Roy's date of birth. And so therefore I read the document and I realize it is about my Duncan Roy, and I want it to be recorded that at the point when I was looking him up, I found this piece of information, okay? So that's where we come to the next step, which is called mark as relevant. When clicking this mark as relevant, what it does is it records on the application document that this piece of information was found, okay? So it records there and it lists all the pieces of information that I say as a property manager, this is relevant. Now, to explain that a little bit further, if we go down to the online search, which is done through Google, we don't record on the application document that when that name online search was done, all this bit of information came up. All we record on the application document is the ones that you as a property manager, when you are doing this process, is the ones that you mark as relevant, okay? Because there is going to be some things that are not about my Duncan Roy or are not relevant to what I'm looking at the moment or the job that I'm doing. So we don't include all that list. What we do instead is we leave it up to you to view the documents and mark and pick and choose which is relevant and which you want pulled over to the application document, okay? And that's important to understand. In these little blue boxes, it will actually explain this as well, okay? So it talks about, so if you forget, oh, what was Kaja talking about? Come back into the tenant check next time you're here and actually read what's in the blue box, because that's everything that it's just written in less words. It explains about that marking is relevant, okay? So we do the Google search, we do news outlets as well. This is really handy for just finding out things a bit more about this person and what they might have been up to, etc. It's not always about only finding out bad stuff. You'll find out some good stuff about people as well, like what are their interests, what have they been involved in, what have they been on the front page of the newspaper, for? Is it good? Is it bad? But this is where you can find out a little bit more. Remembering that with this stuff, we are just giving you, I say, pieces of the puzzle to help you make your decision. Okay, so there's always going to be a human aspect to being a property manager and figuring out whether or not, if there wasn't, it wouldn't be hard to pick and choose people to go into a house. You might have an owner who specifically has given you guidelines as to what they would like in the house. You might, have, things that you are looking for. Maybe there's no pets allowed in this house, stuff. So obviously we need to pick and choose. So we have to try and find out as much information as we can. And that is what the tenant check helps and adds us to, on top of what we've looked at stage 1 and stage 2. And we just are able to provide you those little pieces of puzzle to help you make your decision. So we go through a lot of those there. Make sure that you mark as relevant, view those documents. If my name was not Kaja Jensen, but if my name was James Smith, it's probably going to pull in a lot of people whose irrelevant information as well as relevant information. So you might want to do your own Google search where you enter more parameters. Remember when we just do name matching, so James Smith and whatever his known name is as well. But you might run, all right, James Smith, he is a teacher from Dunedin at this school. And then Google is obviously going to help you find out more information because you've given more information in that search, okay? Remembering that ours is just from that little bit. We also have these 2 buttons. You might not have seen them before, but you can search on LinkedIn and you can also search on Facebook. You need to connect to both your own LinkedIn and you'll need to log in, to own your own LinkedIn and your own Facebook in order to go further with that search, okay? It's just it accesses you to those login pages, okay? So if you want to use those, that's just takes you straight to that login, and then you'd log in with yours to search those people if you needed to. Okay, the last thing to look at in our tenant check. Now, just remember, I just want to go back to this because it's just an unknown fact that as soon as we go into stage 2, we automatically run that background check. As soon as you update that name up the top, it reruns the background, it refreshes that background check, okay? So if they have spelt their name wrong, so Duncan instead of Duncan, and we fix it, it refreshes and runs that background check again, okay? So it even tells you here what we are looking at that check from. So yeah, just really need to want to reiterate that today. Okay, credit checks. So our credit check, what we currently run for everybody is Centrix. So I always say, as soon as you push the button to run a credit check, we charge your agency, okay? But for most of you, you'll all be aware that when you select the successful tenant at the end of the process, what happens is that we give you a credit. It's just unfortunate credit check, and we give you back a credit, as in we go, hey, guess what? You can have the successful credit checks for free. So that's what the majority of you will get. Okay, so you get charged and then you get credited back for those successful credit checks. It's important to understand that we also offer Equifax credit checks for any agencies who want to take this on. So I'll explain about these 2. So when we do the Centrix one, when we run a credit check, we see that credit result here, and we also show you where that sits in that score range. Okay. Now, credit checks, where do they get the information? That's a question I often get asked. Oh, well, where do they get their information from? So Centrix and Equifax pull information from slightly different places, and where they pull them from exactly is like their as I can't tell you, because it's like their KFC secret ingredients, it's their patent, so they don't, not that they don't fully disclose it, it's just that's they run it through certain ones and these guys run it through other certain ones, okay? So I can't actually tell you exactly what things now, but it's run through things like power companies, it's run through banks, and it was just like a lot of different places where people have to process money in that, and so they pick and choose who they pull that to create a credit score for you. Now, you will see this guy has 662. That's a pretty good score in New Zealand. Okay, we look at lots of credit checks and we run stats on that stuff, and 660 is about the average that a person who's successful for in New Zealand getting a house. That's where their credit check kind of sits at. Okay, now you would the way the credit system runs, and it mystifies people, and I was just discussing this at lunch with one of my co-workers, is that he is a foreigner and he moved to New Zealand quite a few years ago, but when he first got here his credit score was 0. The reason is that your credit, if you've just moved to the country, you have not yet used any credit, you've not had a power bill, you've not got a credit card in the New Zealand system, you haven't used the New Zealand banking system, so you will see scores of 0, and it will say something often along the things of insufficient data, and that's generally because they've just moved to New Zealand or they're a young person, so they haven't yet got a credit card. They might have been using a debit card, which is not taken into account. That kind of thing can result in a 0 score. Okay, 0 doesn't mean that you are bad credit. It just means insufficient, and often it will say that below here. But then the other ones, and it also doesn't start like, oh, hey, everybody starts with 1,000 and then it goes down as you do more things. That's not how the credit system works. You kind of build up your credit. So having a home loan, believe it or not, and paying it off at a good rate will give you a good credit score. If you stay on top of those mortgage payments, it'll give you a good credit score, and you'll be surprised that'll be up in the 700s just for doing something like that. So it's quite interesting how that works. It's not just start at 1,000 and work your way down. You can, as a person, increase your credit, and as a person, you can also decrease your credit. What we do when we run your credit check is we show you that result through that system and where it sits with those scores, and then we also show you a bit of a file summary. Now, we show you where and what that person has been getting up to, how old it is, how many file activities, and that's usually like, well, how many times has credit checks been run on them, and judgments, credit defaults, etc. Now, this guy, he's pretty boring. He's had 0, which is why his credit score, in the theory of that, is why it's so good, etc. Knowing, because I've worked with credit scores for a while, seeing that he's got no file activity, seeing that there's nothing here really, I probably wouldn't even bother looking at his full credit report. Okay, now that's just me. I'm not telling you that's what you should do. I'm just saying that's me and my experience of dealing with credit checks. But because we always show you the summary here, but we are always going to show you have the ability to download a full credit check. Now, why do we just show you a summary? Because if you've ever looked at a full credit a report where someone has 20 file activities, 6 judgments, 3 credit defaults, whatever, lots of things, that can be pages of information. And so to save space, we don't show the full credit report here. We always allow you to download it, and we always, in the application document, save the full credit report. So even though his one's boring and got nothing in it, we would still put his full credit report in the application document, okay? So that's for you to understand. We also show you a few more details just by clicking here about consumer information. This can be quite handy. Last known address. Maybe he wrote in his last known address is something different. That might make you go, hey, well, I should ask him, why did he say his last known address was, 123 Pollen Street, but this here is telling me it's 22 Pollen Street. So we can kind of check that out because that's come from his credit report, etc. Okay, it might be a valid reason. I actually just bought it in between that, it wasn't, I lived at home for a little bit or whatever it is, but it's just a good thing there. It also shows you just the information that we have as part of that credit check here, just a little bit more. That is also recorded in that full credit check, just so you know. Okay, below that, so that's Centrix one, and below that we have Equifax. Now, some agencies do like to sign on to have both. Equifax's credit checks do not run through the you get charged for every one, and then you get the successfuls back. You get charged a smaller rate for every single Equifax credit check that's done. Okay, so those ones are only at $6, and majority of you will be paying 10 or 12. Sorry, I don't do the sales, so I don't know let's just say $12 for a credit check to be run. Okay, so the Equifax ones, but we charge you for every single one. Now you might think, well, what do I want? What's better? They pull from different places, and so some people like the information because of that fact. So Centrix and Equifax are, reputable credit reporters here in New Zealand, and some people like, because they pull from different pieces of information, they like to have both available. We automatically always have Centrix on for every single agency, but it's only a matter of your agency requesting to have Equifax turned on, and it will be available like it is here within mine. Once again, it's just a push of a button to run either of them. You don't have to run both of them. You can just choose to run that one, and then sometimes you might want to run Equifax as well. It's very similar in the way that it looks. However, they do use different wording slightly. So here, positive, negative, key contributing factors is just a slightly different way that they report information. Remembering that credit is often all about risk. So it's about like, what risk is it for me to take these people to allow them to loan money to them, to allow them to live in this house. And that's what those kind of information here is, and where it sits on this scale here. So we can see that this guy is low risk according to the Equifax data. Okay, once again, we've got a file summary, and we also have that show report detail here as well. Slightly different in how they appear, and obviously they are two different companies. Okay, so you guys have the ability to request both. Now, whatever one you have, or if you're using both, that will always be on that application document, the full credit reports of those. Okay, so remembering that a tenant check is just part of the process. It's not, we are here to provide pieces of the puzzles for you. We collect the information from the applicants, and then we provide it to you so that you can make your decisions on who's going to be the successful candidate. Okay. Now, earlier I had Erica from McDonald's request me to show you how you edit the ID details. The reason I don't normally do this is because mine is a training account. So fingers crossed this actually works, because mine's not using real data. So, but to rerun it, what would I do is I can view the ID. So it pops up and it shows me the ID. That's where I notice that the number is wrong. And so I would go into here, and it says edit ID details. It's going to pop up. Fingers crossed that it actually works for me, and that you can update that ID information. Cool. So it is a driver's license. Let's see, update this form of ID. There we go. So it's asked me to update the information, and from that ID, I would update that information. So maybe let's say it's a number 5, not a 4, and then expiry date. Let's just chuck anything in. Whatever's on the driver's license, I would put in. And then we would save it and then update it. Cool. That's now been updated. And then that would also rerun that check. Okay, so that's rerun it at the exact same time. So it's as simple as that. Yay, it did work, and it didn't mess up mine, which is good, because like I said, mine's not real data. Okay, guys, it's not actually going to New Zealand Transport Agency and saying, hey, is this a current driver's license? Because it's a fake one that we use for testing purposes. But yeah, I think that's all the questions I've had come through. What I really just want to stress, and like I said, I've probably mentioned it lots of times, is when you come in and you do this, the first thing you should always do is check their ID, verify that ID, the spelling of their names. And I say this because I often have people who come through to us on our support, or they come through to us saying, oh, it didn't tell me this, the background check said this, and then we investigate and we say, oh, because the name's spelt wrong, or oh, because you haven't verified the ID, and therefore you haven't seen that there's a spelling mistake, or that something's not right. And that's why I stress the importance of doing that. That self-verification when they don't give a New Zealand driver's license, that's part of your, the thing that you need to do is it spelt correctly, and is it? Now, people don't tend to spell their names wrong on purpose. It's more just a mistake and they're in a rush or they're, quickly, we've all spelt our names wrong at the bottom when we signed off an email before. So just think an applicant is a human as well. They're probably doing it, by accident as well. But it's really important when it comes down to that we don't find something out in the background checks, or when we run a credit check and it doesn't come through properly. And we're like, oh, the credit check, it doesn't matter. They've got good credit, they've got a 0, insufficient, and it's not actually, it's because the name doesn't match. Actually, that wouldn't happen. It doesn't. If the name isn't spelled right, it won't, it shouldn't run it through. If, lots of factors come through to that, but especially that background check, because we'll always run a background check no matter what on how that name's spelled. So I just really want to stress that to you guys. If for any reason you wanted to get Equifax in your agency, you just have to give us, just reach out to me, Kaja at Renti.co. Oh my gosh, I just about forgot my email address. And we can easily turn that on for you and explain to you the cost difference and all that kind of stuff before we do that. But thanks, guys. I really appreciate you all coming through. Enjoy your Thursday afternoon, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, guys.